You know that feeling when you're sitting at your desk just staring at a screen and you're entirely overwhelmed by the sheer volume of new technology you're expected to master?
Oh, yeah. The absolute exhaustion.
Right, like you have 5 different articles open about the latest generative models. Your inbox is flooded with updates about, some new platform you're supposed to integrate by Friday.
And there's just this crushing ambient pressure.
Yes, a pressure to constantly absorb new information just to stay relevant. It creates the sensation that if you stop learning for even a single day, you are going to become professionally obsolete.
It is a profound exhaustion, and it really permeates the modern workforce right now. I mean, we're dealing with an environment where the half-life of a technical skill is just shrinking rapidly.
It feels like it shrinks every week.
Exactly. And we've been conditioned by decades of corporate culture to believe that accumulation is the only path to security. Like, we think adding more skills, mastering more software, memorizing more frameworks is the only way to survive a technological shift.
But what if that instinct to accumulate is actually the very thing holding us back? Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking a look at a stack of fascinating sources that challenge, well, basically everything we assume about productivity in the current AI era.
It's some really paradigm-shifting data.
It really is. We're looking at academic systematic reviews from Springer and the Review of Managerial Science, extensive corporate studies from MIT Sloan and BCG, and a highly revealing 2026 report from Workday, alongside some practical implementation frameworks.
A lot of heavy hitters in this stack.
For sure. And our mission for this deep dive is to explore a counterintuitive concept that is buried within all this business data. Because the secret to mastering artificial intelligence isn't about learning more. It's actually about the deliberate act of unlearning.
Which requires, a fundamental rewiring of how we approach professional development and organizational design.
Totally. And to set the stage for you listening right now, there's a metaphor from the source text that perfectly anchors this concept. So imagine your company, or even just your own professional brain, as a closet full of clothes.
Okay, I love this metaphor.
Right. You open the doors, and it is packed to the brim. You have suits that no longer fit your current role. You have shirts permanently stained with the mindset of, we've always done it this way.
We all have a few of those shirts.
Exactly. And you have these incredibly tight, uncomfortable shoes that you keep on the bottom rack just in case a specific outdated scenario arises.
Right, the just-in-case shoes.
Yeah. But you cannot fit a brand new, highly efficient wardrobe into a closet that is already bursting at the seams with things you no longer wear. If you want to make room for the new, you have to aggressively clean out the closet.
And that cleaning process is exactly where individuals and organizations are currently failing.
Yeah.
I mean, they are buying the new wardrobe and just shoving it into the crammed closet, expecting it to somehow organize itself.
Which never works. But before we get into the mechanics of how companies are actually solving this, I want to challenge the premise just a little bit.
Sure, let's hear it.
So we've established the closet needs cleaning, but isn't unlearning just like a dressed-up corporate buzzword for forgetting?
Ah, I see where you're going.
I mean, if a company switches from legacy software to an AI platform, eventually the employees will just forget how to use the old system through sheer lack of use, right? Why do we need a special framework for something that happens naturally?
Well, the academic literature makes a vital distinction here. They specifically highlight the work of researchers like Singh and Zara, and they define forgetting as a passive, accidental process.
You're losing your keys.
Right, it's simply the decay of memory over time due to disuse. Unlearning, conversely, is an intentional, deliberate act.
Intentional, okay?
Yes. It is the active process of identifying and discarding knowledge, routines, beliefs, or behaviors that are obsolete. The problem is that these old routines don't just passively fade away. They actively block the adoption of new methods.
Because the brain, or, the corporate structure, naturally prefers the path of least resistance.
Precisely. And the researchers use this term called learning rigidities.
Learning rigidities.
Yeah. So when an organization finds a routine that makes them highly successful, they optimize it. They build incentive structures around it. It becomes hard-coded into the neurological pathways of the employees and the cultural fabric of the company.
Because it saves cognitive energy to rely on an automated routine.
Exactly. But when the environment undergoes a turbulent change like, say, the sudden integration of generative AI, those exact routines that caused your past success ossify, they turn into rigid barriers.
Oh, wow.
So you aren't just failing to learn the new AI tool, your entire system is actively fighting the new tool because the old routine is so deeply entrenched.
Which means we need a mechanism to actively break those rigidities. And the sources mention Barry O'Reilly's unlearning framework. How does that actually work mechanically?
So the framework breaks the process down into three sequential phases. Phase one is awareness. This requires auditing your daily tasks and recognizing which processes are legacy artifacts rather than value drivers.
Right, figuring out what's actually useful.
Exactly. Then phase two is discarding, and this is the mechanical dismantling of the old routine. It is the conscious, often painful decision to stop requiring 5 layers of approval or to stop drafting reports from scratch.
That sounds like the hardest part.
It absolutely is. But only after you've actively dismantled the old routine do you reach phase three, which is making space for new learning. You cannot effectively reach phase three without executing phase two.
It makes me think of this in terms of software engineering, actually, rather than just a closet.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Like, if you think about unlearning, like dealing with technical debt, you have a legacy software program built on a million lines of old base code, and suddenly you want to add this incredibly powerful, lightning-fast AI feature. If you just patch the new AI feature on top of the messy, outdated base code, the system is going to crash, or at best, run terribly. You don't just, like, forget the old code. You have to go in and painstakingly refactor it. You have to prune the dead code to make the system lean enough to handle the new processing power.
That is a much more accurate representation of what is happening neurologically and organizationally. I mean, you are pruning synaptic connections or corporate workflows to reduce friction.
Still should, yeah.
And that friction is the core issue we see in the empirical data. If we look at the systematic review studies by Sharma and Lenka or Klammer and colleagues, they demonstrate that intentional organizational unlearning is the primary driver for innovation in turbulent environments.
So it's not just a nice to have.
No, it isn't just a soft skill. It is a measurable prerequisite for survival.
Well, let's dig into that data, because this is where the theoretical concept sort of collides with the actual AI revolution. The MIT Sloan and BCG studies provide some pretty heavy-hitting evidence about who actually benefits from these tools.
Yeah, the BCG and MIT Sloan research is fascinating because it looked at how highly skilled workers interact with AI.
Okay.
They found that these workers achieved the absolute highest productivity gains, but solely when they combine the AI's output with their own expert judgment.
Makes sense.
But here's the catch. The workers who failed to unlearn their traditional workflows, the ones who treated the AI just like another search engine or a junior assistant that needed constant micromanagement, they actually saw their performance degrade.
Wait, if the BCG study shows that highly skilled workers get the most gains, doesn't that contradict the idea that they need to unlearn?
How do you mean?
Well, usually the most highly skilled people are the ones who are most deeply entrenched in their specific, specialized methods. You'd think they would be the worst at unlearning.
And that is the paradox the data highlights. The highly skilled workers who succeeded were the ones who possessed the cognitive flexibility to unlearn how they applied their expertise.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. They had to discard the belief that their value came from generating the baseline work. Instead, they unlearned the generation phase and shifted their deep expertise entirely to the evaluation and refinement phase.
That's a huge shift.
It is. Furthermore, recent reports focusing on Spain and Latin America show productivity leaps of 20 to 27%. But those massive gains were strictly observed in companies that underwent a deliberate cultural shift.
So decentralizing decision-making, dismantling old hierarchies, that sort of thing.
Exactly. The companies that just purchased the enterprise AI licenses but maintained their traditional approval matrices, they saw negligible gains.
So they bought the new technology but refused to refactor the base code.
Spot on.
Which brings us to a highly specific finding from a 2026 Workday study that honestly perfectly illustrates this failure. And it's a bit funny. They identified a phenomenon they call work slop.
Work slop. Such a great term.
All right, so employees are using AI to save hours of time on content generation. The machine creates a draft in seconds. But then the employees are completely wasting all of that saved time by endlessly verifying, tweaking, and rewriting this mediocre, generic, AI-generated work slop.
It is the ultimate bottleneck in the current AI rollout. Workers are saving time on the front end only to hemorrhage it on the back end.
So wait, if the machine is doing the heavy lifting, Why are we still so bogged down? It's like an ironic cycle.
Well, this happens because they are still clinging to binary mindsets. On one side, they hold the ingrained belief that, I have to touch every single word for this to be considered my work.
Right, the need for total control.
Yes. And on the other side, they harbor a deep distrust of the machine, assuming it is inherently flawed. So they are applying their old, heavy-handed human-to-human review processes to human-to-machine interactions.
So they're essentially micromanaging the algorithm because their professional identity is tied to being the creator. Like, if the machine creates the draft, the employee feels compelled to rewrite it just to justify their salary and their role in the process.
Exactly. What they have to unlearn is that need for total control and ownership of the initial creation. They must transition to a mindset of smart verification.
Smart verification, I like that.
They need to embrace the identity of an editor and a curator rather than a primary author. If you do not actively discard the old need to control the genesis of an idea, AI actually creates more administrative burden for you in the form of managing work slop.
So how do we actually apply this playbook to the daily grind? I mean, moving from the academic data to the reality of an office environment, how do we stop drowning in work slop and start multiplying our capabilities?
Right, the practical application.
The sources outline this across 3 distinct levels, right? Individual, team, and organizational. Let's start with the individual.
So at the individual level, the absolute hardest rigidity to break is the deeply ingrained corporate belief that busyness equals productivity.
Oh, man. That's a tough one.
It really is. For decades, visible effort, being at your desk, sending late-night emails, constantly multitasking has been rewarded. Individuals have to actively unlearn the guilt associated with letting a machine handle the repetitive tasks.
That guilt is so real, though.
It is. They have to unlearn perfectionism on first drafts, allowing themselves the cognitive space to think strategically rather than tactically.
Okay, so then moving to the team level, the sources emphasize letting go of rigid hierarchies and creating psychological safety. But, psychological safety is one of those terms that gets thrown around in every HR seminar.
True.
How does unlearning actually mechanically rewire a team to accept failure?
It requires dismantling the structural penalties for experimentation. The sources point to frameworks like hackathons or Google's famous 20% time.
Right, where you spend a fifth of your time on side projects.
Yes. And the reason 20% time works mechanically is that it systematically unlinks exploration from the formal performance review process. A team has to unlearn the idea that every hour of work must map directly to a predetermined linear KPI.
Hey.
When you officially sanction time for unstructured experimentation, you reduce the neurological fear response associated with failure. You train the team that generating a failed AI prototype is not career death, but a necessary step in the discovery process.
And then zooming out to the organizational level, this requires leadership to relentlessly audit legacy processes. I mean, if you are measuring your employees' success based on utilization rates or hours logged, AI is going to absolutely shatter your metrics.
Completely shatter them.
An employee might accomplish in 2 hours what used to take 10.
Yeah.
If the organization hasn't unlearned the hourly value metric, that employee is going to be penalized for their efficiency.
Which is why the most successful companies are focusing on completely reconfiguring job roles rather than just automating isolated tasks.
Let's ground this with the marketing manager anecdote from the sources because I think it perfectly illustrates the shift from creation to curation.
Oh, this is a great example.
So we all know the traditional 3-hour brainstorming session. You lock 8 people in a room, you stare at a whiteboard, and you force everyone to throw out ideas until something decent emerges.
The worst.
It is exhausting, highly subjective, and, frankly, often dominated by the loudest voice in the room.
It's a classic learning rigidity, a process that yielded results in the past and became hard-coded into the marketing culture.
Right. But in this new era, the marketing manager has to actively unlearn that entire ritual. They recognize the 3-hour brainstorm as a dinosaur. Instead, they leverage an AI model to generate 50 diverse, highly specific campaign ideas in 3 minutes.
3 minutes instead of 3 hours.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, the human team has to unlearn the need to generate from scratch, which is a massive ego hit for creatives who pride themselves on original ideation. They have to let go of the whiteboard phase entirely.
And that's hard.
It's really hard. But instead, they shift their cognitive energy to selecting, refining, mixing, and applying deep human criteria to those 50 AI-generated concepts. The result is dramatically better final campaigns and the elimination of a grueling 3-hour meeting.
They didn't just learn a new prompt?
No, they unlearned the structural necessity of the brainstorming meeting itself.
It is a brilliant illustration of how unlearning shifts the human cognitive load to where it is most valuable. However, we have to address the profound friction involved in this transition.
Let's talk about the fiction.
Because this all sounds highly logical in a vacuum, but human beings are intensely emotional about their work.
I am so glad you brought that up because, look, if I walk into my office tomorrow and tell my seasoned, highly competent team to drop the routines that make them feel secure in their jobs, they aren't going to see it as an exciting pivot.
No, they're going to panic.
They are going to panic. They're going to view it as a direct threat to their livelihood and their professional identity. They will assume they're being automated out of the building.
That emotional resistance is the most significant hurdle identified across the literature. It is fundamentally an identity crisis.
An identity crisis.
Yes. When your entire career value has been tied to knowing the answers and executing a specific workflow, being told to discard that workflow triggers a deep survival response.
So how does a leader actually mitigate that threat response?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't just send out a memo mandating that everyone feels secure.
No, you have to model vulnerability from the top down. The research explicitly states that unlearning must be demonstrated by leadership before it can be expected from the staff.
Walk the walk.
Exactly. A leader has to publicly dismantle one of their own entrenched processes. They have to stand in front of their team and say, this weekly reporting structure that I personally built 5 years ago is now obsolete. It no longer serves us, and I am killing it.
Wow. Just owning it publicly.
When leadership admits that their own methods are outdated, it removes the stigma of obsolescence. It shifts the narrative from you, the employee, are obsolete to our historical processes are obsolete.
That makes total sense. It creates a shared, safe environment for dismantling the old code. But, okay, even if you get people on board emotionally, how do you track if they're actually changing their behavior? We manage what we measure in business, and measuring a negative, measuring what people are not doing anymore seems like an operational nightmare.
It's tricky.
If the framework isn't tracked, companies will just bolt AI onto their broken processes.
The measurement problem requires a complete pivot in your key performance indicators. You stop measuring output volume and start measuring newly created capacity.
Okay, so tracking freed up hours.
Yes, you track the raw hours freed up and monitor how that time is reallocated to strategic high-level tasks. You measure the velocity of experimentation, like how fast can a team get an AI-assisted prototype to market today compared to last year.
Oh, I love that metric.
And you officially implement the unlearning framework into the business rhythm. The sources suggest holding quarterly unlearning workshops where the sole agenda is identifying legacy processes and officially sanctioning their removal.
A quarterly audit specifically designed to kill off bad processes. I like it. But what happens when you hit the skills gap? Not everyone adapts at the same pace. You're going to have individuals who fiercely protect their old routines despite the workshops and the leadership vulnerability.
That is where social proof becomes critical. You cannot force the laggards through punitive measures. It only increases their emotional resistance.
So what's the solution?
It relies on identifying and heavily rewarding the unlearning champions within the organization. When employees see their peers receiving promotions or public recognition specifically because they abandoned an old routine and leveraged a new AI workflow, the culture shifts rapidly.
So positive reinforcement.
Exactly. You combine that with peer-to-peer training so the new methods are taught by colleagues rather than mandated by executives.
And doing so carefully ensures you don't swing the pendulum too far, which leads right back to the risk of work slop we discussed earlier. If people unlearn their critical faculties entirely in the rush to adopt AI, they start trusting the machine blindly without any verification.
Which is dangerous. The ultimate goal of unlearning is not to become completely dependent on the algorithm.
Right.
The goal is the continuous cultivation of critical human judgment. You have to teach people that their value has evolved. They are no longer valued for producing the raw data. They are valued for interrogating it, contextualizing it, and applying it strategically.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? The core message running through every piece of academic research and corporate data we've reviewed today is, well, surprisingly empowering.
It really is.
AI does not replace people who are willing to unlearn. It multiplies them. The organizations that will dominate the next decade are not the ones with the largest software budgets or the most engineers. They're the ones building a resilient culture of intentional unlearning, rapid experimentation, and structural accountability.
There's a quote from the source text that perfectly distills this entire dynamic. It states, "Computers and AI systems are easily reprogrammed. Humans need to unlearn with poise and courage."
Boys and courage.
I think the choice of the word courage is incredibly apt. It takes genuine bravery to admit that the highly specialized skills that got you to your current level of success are not the skills that will carry you into the future.
It really does.
Yeah.
Poise and courage. That really captures the human element of this technological shift. So we want to leave you with a direct challenge today, echoing the call to action from our sources. Look critically at your own daily work life. Identify just one specific thing you are going to intentionally unlearn this week.
Just one thing.
Is it an absurd administrative rule you follow just because it's always been there? Is it the toxic habit of checking emails during hours you should be doing deep strategic work? Is it the ingrained belief that you have to draft every single document from a blank page? Find that rigidity and deliberately let it go.
Prune the dead code.
Make space for the extraordinary.
Because if you do not actively make that space, the new capabilities simply have nowhere to live. You'll just be cramming a supercar engine into a chassis that cannot handle the torque.
It's just going to tear itself apart. And that brings me to a final thought I want you to chew on as we wrap up. We've established that intentional unlearning is the ultimate competitive advantage in the AI era. But if that is objectively true, what does that mean for our traditional education systems, or even the fundamental concept of a resume?
Oh, that's a massive question.
Right. For centuries, we have built our entire professional identities around proving how much knowledge we have aggressively accumulated. We list our degrees, our decades of experience, our mastery of specific static tools. We prove our worth by showing how full our closet is.
Which is exactly what we're saying doesn't work anymore.
Exactly. But if artificial intelligence now possesses all the accumulated static knowledge in the world, are we going to have to fundamentally shift how we signal our value to society? Are we rapidly moving toward a future where we don't get hired for what we know, but rather we get hired for how quickly and courageously we can throw our old knowledge away?
It is a profound question, and it challenges the very foundation of how we measure human value in a post-AI world.
Something to think about the next time you're staring at that packed closet. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.